Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at MS Dynamics World. On this episode, I am talking to returning guest Brendan Coffey, Director of Revenue at Mekorma, to recap his Directions North America 2025 experiences. Mekorma is the sponsor of this episode, and Brendan tells us about some of the trends he took note of at the event, and he also shares some of the conversations he had around check configuration in Dynamics 365 Business Central. Streamlining check processing to improve security and compliance is one of the ways partners are adapting to better serve Business Central customers, Brendan explains, and he sees it as one example of a broader mindset among SMBs to adopt Business Central as the heart of business operations, not just as a bookkeeping or a data management solution. All right, I'm here with Brendan Coffey of Mekorma. Brendan, welcome back to the podcast. For those who haven't met you before, can you just give a brief introduction?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jason, for having me. My name is Brendan Coffey. I'm the Director of Revenue for Mekorma. I have been in the fintech and ERP space for about 10 years, and I'm out of Denver, Colorado.
All right. Well, it's great to have you back. And we're starting with a topic that I always enjoy discussing, which is sort of recapping a recent event, and a recent really interesting event at that. It was Directions North America 2025, a partner-based conference, and one where I think both of us probably got a bit of a sense of where some of the interest in thinking in the marketplace is heading. Let's start with the demand for, compliance and security. Can you talk a little bit about some of the urgent market demands there?
Yeah, absolutely. We had such a good and interesting time at Directions, and it was good to see you there, Jason, and a bunch of our partners, and be able to have these kind of conversations to get a feel for where things are. One of the sessions that I think both of us were in had to do with how people in general, but particularly those in maybe leadership roles and specifically in the CFO role, react to an environment that is potentially seen as less consistent, a little bit more choppy waters, and some of the kind of natural inclinations that role, and we all have, and related to really being able to predict and feel secure in the processes and technology that we have, and also in our buying decisions. So one of the main things that came up for us as we kind of shared what our solutions do is related to compliance and risk. And just that the amount of uncertainty in the world has made that kind of a real through line for conversations that partners are having with their clients. One in particular is just if your listeners are unfamiliar, there's something in the government called the Office of Foreign Asset Control. I am particularly familiar with this as I've been in fintech for a while, but I think what struck us is just that this is something that has only very recently become more relevant or prevalent in the world as some of our geopolitical situation changes. The Office of Foreign Asset Control essentially manages what entities the United States government sanctions, and therefore a United States-based organization should not be doing business with. And so that honestly was just an interesting intersection, I think, as it is for all of us when our kind of professional lives intersect with some of what we hear on the news. But that was just an interesting through line that, again, we heard a lot about, that there was a lot of questions about. So we're excited to help the community at large kind of understand how some of it's shifting and kind of what both partners and their customers can do to address it.
Yeah, and taking that a little bit further, does the conversation, or did those conversations ever sort of also look toward the future, more specifically, like what businesses can do to plan for the future to stay ahead of what they're seeing sort of unfold in the present?
Yeah. So I think that there are two through lines, I think, which is the first one is kind of ongoing and real-time compliance tools that can allow for businesses to kind of really before even perhaps doing business with another company, making sure that they have all of their boxes checked. So for our example, we have two tools that interface directly with databases, one being the OFAC database that we referenced, and the other being the IRS database. Otherwise, this is a pretty manual experience for companies to have to do this. But what our tool allows you to do is really immediately upon having a vendor available in your system, check it against those databases to make sure that there's no red flags. The other thing that I think is going to be important for businesses as we kind of look to the future is to be able to be somewhat agile or nimble in their ability to shift suppliers and their supply chain as, again, some things will shift potentially as time goes on. And that does highlight for a lot of organizations some of the opportunities, let's say, in their processes when onboarding new vendors. So this is everything from, again, checking to make sure that those vendors are compliant to how they're going to do business with them, how they invoice, if there's a purchase order, through the means that they can accept payment. So having those tools available as really just as a baseline for potential shifts in their supply chain is critical and something that will hopefully future. Again, there's no future proofing for everything, but certainly at least looking forward to the potential shift in vendors.
All right. I wanted to maybe change gears just a bit because I know another topic that I've heard from your team came up at Directions North America was check configuration and some of the trends and discussions that you had about that topic.
Yeah. So one of the things that is been very front of mind for Mekorma, if your listeners know Mekorma from our product line, checks are a big part of it. We have been known in the industry for a long time for the ability to configure to a pretty significant degree how checks can work in GP. And as of the release of our V1 solution, we were able to come out with a suite of products related to check configuration in Business Central. And I think one of the things that was highlighted for us at Directions was just how exciting this was in the partner community. If you have any experience working in Business Central to try and configure checks, you may be familiar with some of those challenges, in that even something as simple as being able to move the Micker line to where it ought to go is something that actually does cause quite a bit of headache in Business Central. So there's a very manual and painstaking way to do that. And our solution really kind of finishes the swing for those companies that do need it. I think another trend, and Jason, I'd love to hear if this is an interesting or something that you noticed, is to say it was really awesome to see the global nature of the attendees at Directions this year. There was a lot more international folks, which kind of just underscores how large and how vibrant the community within the Dynamics world is. But Business Central comes from, I think is built off of something called NAV. In our European counterparts, checks are really not a big, just due to the nature of the way that the European Union and European countries treat their financial system, checks are really not required. They're not important. They're really very downplayed. So Business Central itself as a solution does not necessarily have a robust check solution in it. And so I think this was just really underscored by kind of the discussions that we had with, again, both folks that are from the United States, but then also the broader community, to say that, yes, the check functionality in Business Central is very lightweight kind of by design, and how excited the community was that we came out with some of the tools that will allow for those folks still using checks to be able to easily get them configured and start working out of Business Central for the United States customers.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. Yeah, certainly a good international representation, I would say, in the attendees at Directions North America 2025. Yeah, to your point, I think it also reflects sort of the broad interests of who Business Central is for today. I think we talked about this in our last podcast, but Mekorma's effort to bring your V1 Business Central solution to the market and to have it out there now, and to also bring your specializations, which includes all this expertise from the GP world that you're sort of translating into and making relevant for the Business Central world, mixed together with sort of the broader sort of global Business Central market, is such an interesting story today. Is there anything else you can say about that? Anything else you took from the event in particular when it comes to sort of harmonizing all these different trends that are happening?
Yeah, I think the other, and this has been ongoing for several years now, but that, when you get into a space like Directions, is that the office of the CFO, I think, has undergone a pretty substantial transition. This is just my perspective. Over the last 10 years, it's probably been going on longer than that, where that office needs to be as much a technical one as it is a financial discipline one, in the sense that the tools and the technology used in that space are as important as the rigor of the discipline itself. And so it's just such a fascinating and exciting thing to be part of, where we have folks that bring all of the discipline, right, as far as best practices behind any number of financial processes, in with the what we would call software people, right, is to say the folks that are really in the weeds when it comes to how a system can support those. It lends to a lot of really, really interesting conversations, and both sides, quote unquote, the finance side and the software side, really wanting to understand more about each other and being able to connect dots and have those two parts of the Venn diagram continue to overlap and solve the problems for organizations. So I always love going to conferences like that for that reason, to kind of watch that cultural interplay between kind of two otherwise disparate groups.
Right. Yeah. And that raises an interesting point, and something I know that the Mekorma team sort of has in its sights for the future here. And that's really making the case for why Business Central is really not a bookkeeping tool. It's a strategic tool for business operations. Like to your last point, that it's sort of the technology expertise or being able to sort of use the solution for business advantage, I guess you would say, maybe you would explain another way, is really what it's there for, and really how I guess partners should be talking with their customers about the opportunity at hand. Are there specific points that you want to dive into on that perspective?
Yeah, I think that kind of as a parallel trend to the kind of cultural one between kind of the IT team, if you will, and the finance team, is also just a mindset shift as far as how the technology works. So this, again, has been an ongoing development over the years. It's interesting to watch, right, where Microsoft has made some, and Microsoft's not alone, right? There's a lot of companies that have very intentionally created a marketplace for strategic integrators and then for ISVs to be able to really provide, really an optimized value for a customer. And I think that it's really come into sharp relief and into its own to a certain extent with Business Central. And I think that, at least for me, I was struck during directions and listening to how strategic integrators think about this, how other ISVs think about this, around how the ERP can be a central nervous system, particularly with the way that Business Central is built, a central nervous system for a number of processes, where hitherto there was what I would lovingly call a little bit of a Frankenstein, where we had a bunch of different systems that may have talked to each other, may have needed some manual grabbing of information from one system, putting in another. It could have been done via email. So we had a bunch of different systems that were cobbled together in a way that worked. But now that Business Central is this central nervous system, it can really be, again, to use the words that you said, is more than bookkeeping. That a lot of business processes can be entirely run using it. And that gives, again, the finance and IT collaboration experience a lot of opportunity to review, okay, we have been doing this business process this way for years, but that is because we had to, based on that nature of the Frankenstein. And now, how might we look at this with that robust engine of Business Central in the center, and including the way that Microsoft has built it with AppSource and the way that it can all be integrated to really level up not just the technical, but the process. So yes, it's something that I think we as an ISV would love to continue the discussion on. I think we're going to be having a webcast later this year to celebrate, both from an ISV perspective and a strategic integrator perspective, really how much that enables us to drive value for our customers. So stay tuned. And I think we're excited to have that conversation.
All right, excellent. Yeah, so certainly some very interesting and important plans, in place for the Mekorma team and the product lineup this year. I do look forward to learning more about that from you and from others on the leadership team as well. Yeah, any other impressions or memories of Directions North America 2025 that you would leave us with?
Yeah, I would say that what comes to mind for me, particularly in light of that framework of being able to really think even more broadly about how problems can be solved with something like the groundwork of Business Central. It's so interesting to watch people very talented at this be able to take the raw material of both Business Central itself and potentially a network of ISVs and put together something which, yes, I will call it beautiful, but is to say something really, really robust and really, really that checks a lot of the boxes and even some that weren't even intended to be checked using those tools. So it's really, really wonderful for an ISV to see that, we're going to give you a paintbrush and really what beautiful creations from a business process and business solution perspective have been created with it. And that's just such a vibrant space and it's exciting to be part of.
All right. Yeah. Really interesting way to put that. And I think I know what you mean. Well, Brendan, it's been great catching up with you here. Thanks for giving us a bit of an update and a recap post directions. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jason.
This has been another episode of the MSDW podcast. My thanks once again to Brendan Coffey for joining. And this message from Mekorma. Don't let your business fall behind. Stay ahead and ensure you're fully compliant. To learn more, you can reach out to Mekorma at info@mekorma.com or book a meeting. There is a link in the show notes. And that's it for this episode. If you want to get in touch with me, you can send me an email, jason@msdynamicsworld.com. For all of our updates, please do follow us on LinkedIn. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.